Next on Currents News, a second day of cancellations for the Holy Father, who is apparently nursing a cold. This as the world confronts the deadly coronavirus, which is raising new fears while killing financial markets.
Teenagers being taught a lesson inside of a courtroom. But it's not what you think. It's all part of their Catholic education. I'm Jessica Easthope, and I'll have the story from Brooklyn Supreme Court.
Plus, a preview of the new film Fatima, which tells the story of the apparitions of Mary to 3 young children in Portugal. Currents News starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. We begin with the latest on the Pope's health. He's under his doctor's care with what's being called a mild cold. But again today, he canceled most of his schedule. The Holy Father is sick at the same time the world confronts a growing epidemic. Melissa Butts reports the latest from St. Peter's Square.
Amidst growing fears of the coronavirus spreading throughout Italy, Pope Francis is home sick for the second day in a row. He's canceled all of his meetings except for morning mass. The 83-year-old pontiff first showed signs he was sick on Ash Wednesday. Now again today, he's canceling some of his meetings after skipping a penance service with Rome priests yesterday. Vatican spokesman Matteo Bruni is saying Francis is slightly unwell. However, Thursday morning, Pope Francis met with members of the global Catholic climate movement, and Friday morning he celebrated Mass at Casa Santa Marta. From all indications, the Holy Father is suffering from a mild cold and is not concerned about having coronavirus, since he greeted pilgrims at both events and is still participating in private meetings from his home. Pope Francis spoke about the virus at his general audience Wednesday morning. It is spreading throughout Italy, but no one in Rome is infected.
Desidero esprimere nuovamente la mia vicinanza ai malati del coronavirus e agli operatori sanitari che li curano, come pure alle autorità civili e a tutti coloro che si stanno impegnando per assistere i pazienti e fermare il contagio.
Pope Francis didn't seem too concerned about his health on Wednesday, though, as he still toured St. Peter's Square and even greeted pilgrims. Most likely, the Pope is laying low and taking care, especially since he only has one lung. The other was removed as a teenager, likely from an infection. By resting now, he can be healthy and ready to depart on his week-long spiritual Lenten retreat in the south of Rome on Sunday afternoon. Pope Francis is resting under the care of his personal physician. He's staying at home inside the Vatican at his home in Casa Santa Marta. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
More than 650 Italians are infected with the virus that's sweeping through the country. 17 people have died. The Vatican is taking precautions to make sure everyone in the city-state is protected from the illness. At the Holy See's medical clinic, a nurse and doctor are on call around the clock, and an action plan is in place to treat anyone who comes down with the disease. Mexico is confirming its first coronavirus case. The male patient is said to be doing well, suffering from symptoms similar to a mild cold. His family of 5 is in isolation as doctors monitor them closely. In South Korea, there are seemingly endless lines of people trying to buy face masks. There are more infections in the country than anywhere outside mainland China. Almost 2,500 Korean people are sick and 13 have died. Right now, the outbreak in South Korea is spreading faster than the epidemic in China. And in North Korea, foreign diplomats are getting out of the country to stay safe from the disease. Germany, France, and Switzerland have all closed their offices in Pyongyang. The communist country claims they don't have any infections, but experts warn a deadly outbreak is highly possible. As of today, nearly 60 nations are reporting cases within their borders. Another rough day on Wall Street, but it could have been worse until the Fed signaled a possible interest rate cut. The Dow is down more than 1,000 points. The blue chips ended off by more than 350 points, closing at 25,409. On the other hand, the Nasdaq finished up. It was less than a point, but still a gain to finish at 85.67. And the S&P lost more than 24 points to end at 29.54. Stay with us because in just a few minutes, Brooklyn's Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio will be here. He's talking about the coronavirus and its impact on Lent. That's still ahead in this newscast. President Trump's attempt to keep asylum seekers out of the country suffered a setback today. They must be allowed in after a federal appeals court in San Francisco overturned the so-called Remain in Mexico policy. Since the rule went into effect a year ago, more than 59,000 asylum seekers returned back at the southern border. The White House is likely to appeal today's court decision. Turning to politics, it is a make or break primary for the Democrats who want to be president. Tomorrow, voters in South Carolina will hit the polls. It's the last primary before Super Tuesday and could be the last primary for a few candidates in this race. Reed Binion reports.
South Carolina, the state Joe Biden calls his firewall. But in reality, it's his fourth quarter and he needs a Hail Mary.
Are you going to win?
Yes. All right. Because South Carolina is the trajectory to winning the Democratic nomination.
South Carolina looks favorable for Biden. He got an endorsement from Representative James Clyburn this week, and in a new Monmouth University poll, Biden is ahead of national frontrunner Senator Bernie Sanders.
One of the serious things we got to do is make sure that we defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country, Donald Trump.
South Carolina is basically do or die for some Democratic presidential hopefuls, like Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Are you in this fight with me? Let's do this.
Senator Amy Klobuchar.
And I'm asking you to vote for me. Thank you so much, everyone.
Businessman Tom Steyer.
I just don't believe that having the government take over big parts of the economy is a smart thing to do.
And former Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Not all of the answers have to come from Washington, but more of the funding should.
Another former mayor, Mike Bloomberg, isn't on the ballot in South Carolina, focusing instead on later contests. I'm Reed Binion reporting.
And from presidential hopeful to podcast host, 2016 Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton will soon begin hosting her very own podcast. You can listen to the former senator from New York beginning in late spring. That's when the so far Untitled project is set to begin. A big day for high schoolers in the Brooklyn Diocese, seeing firsthand how the courts work. Students attending Bay Ridge's Xaverian High School getting a VIP tour thanks to a top judge who knows the school well. Currents News' Jessica Easthope reports from downtown Brooklyn.
You feel like you're between a rock and a hard place. Yeah, exactly. I understand what you feel.
When Judge Vincent Del Giudice steps onto the bench, he can be pretty tough.
Do you understand? Yes. I'll see you back here May 15th.
But his stern public persona is nowhere to be found when he talks about something close to his heart, his alma mater.
My family made it important that I had to have a Catholic education and instilled in me the value of education, and so did the Xaverian brothers. And for what you take, you have to give back.
For Judge Del Giudice, giving back looks like this. Every year, he invites a group of seniors from Xaverian High School to get an inside look at what it's like to do his job.
So I have to keep the playing field level.
This year, the kids who were in a law class toured his chambers and watched him make rulings on some of the many murder cases he presides over, all part of a Catholic education that takes them far beyond the walls of a classroom.
All the Xaverian stuff all around the room, especially behind me too. It's really nice to see. A lot of Xaverian alumni have a lot of great things. Like everybody really, once you leave, it's like they're always paying homage to it.
Though the students got a complete rundown of the judicial process, what they found most valuable was something that can't be taught in a courtroom or a classroom.
We do a lot of things like based on like community service and a lot of things based on like what's right and wrong for the religion aspect. So I feel like this plays into that really well.
It's more of like a moral thing from his perspective. He's more of a person inside and he has to look through like the case himself.
And it's Xaverian Judge Del Giudice credits for his balanced scales of justice.
As a Catholic, all right, you use your moral compass in deciding issues. And that's what I try and instill in the students.
In downtown Brooklyn, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The NYPD remembered a hero at St. Sebastian's Church in Woodside, Queens today. The memorial service held for fallen NYPD transit officer and Catholic Michael Melchiona. 50 years ago today, he was shot while in pursuit of a gunman. He left behind a wife, 2-year-old, and 5-week-old infant. Those children and the rest of his family were at the church. One of his brothers, Henry, was moved by the cops' memorial.
Well, to me, this is an amazing thing for all these people to be here 50 years later. It's really amazing that they still remember. And you know what? That's what makes us family.
Michael was 29 years old when he was killed. He grew up on Skillman Avenue, not far from St. Sebastian's. Upstate, the Diocese of Buffalo filed for bankruptcy protection this morning. The diocese is facing sexual abuse allegations that have been made under New York's Child Victims Act. The law suspended the statute of limitations for abuse claims for 1 year, beginning last August. Today's filing allows the diocese to keep its main ministries going while resolving its debts. And at the Vatican, the Pope is forming a child protection task force. Today's move comes a year after the Holy Father's summit on abuse. The new group will beef up the ways children are kept safe, and they'll help bishops around the world better handle accusations of wrongdoing. The task force will work for the next 2 years. There's a lot more news headed your way. Tensions escalating in Syria, worsening the humanitarian crisis, thousands of families fleeing the violence. And Bishop DiMarzio showing solidarity with the Asian community in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak. Plus, it's a film inspired by real events, and we have a sneak peek at Fatima, the story of 3 children who were visited by the Blessed Mother. The Secretary General of NATO is urging Russia and the Syrian regime to stop airstrikes in Idlib.
I call on them to stop their offensive, to respect international law, and to back UN efforts for a peaceful solution.
Jens Stoltenberg is calling for the return to the 2018 ceasefire after an airstrike yesterday killed 33 Turkish soldiers. But the regime is forging ahead with an offensive to recapture the rebel-held province. Turkey has given the Syrian government a deadline by the end of February to withdraw troops, and a proposed summit between the Turkish and Russian presidents has been called off. That's stoking fears of further escalations on the ground, and what that means for the 3 million people living in northern Syria. There is nowhere to run to. Schools in the city of Idlib in northern Syria have been converted into shelters. Now it appears these are targets of the Assad regime backed by Russia. This school and 9 others that had been housing those fleeing the violence were struck in 1 day with deadly results. Russia has rejected calls for a ceasefire, stating it would be giving in to, quote, terrorists. But the Russian and Syrian regime bombardment of Idlib is not confined to armed groups, but rather it has been targeting civilians. On the edge of a small cluster of tents not far from Turkey's closed border, one extended family has moved underground into a man-made cave originally dug out to shelter cows and goats. There are around 45 of them living here. When the kids sleep, the women take turns looking over them to make sure there are no snakes or scorpions in the space. Half the children are said to be sick. There is no heat inside the cave. Food is cooked outdoors where the children warm themselves. They say all they want is to live without fear, a dream for the millions trapped in Idlib in a war that from the onset has had no rules and no real front lines. Just under 1 million civilians have fled the government offensive this year. Right now, there are 3.6 million Syrian refugees in Turkey, and the fear is there will be a new influx of hundreds of thousands. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu holding a campaign rally ahead of Monday's unprecedented vote in that country. For the 3rd time in the past 12 months, Israelis will cast their ballots in a national election. The first election, his party won. The second, his opponent's party won, but neither was able to form a majority coalition in Israel's parliament. Also, since the last election, Netanyahu was indicted on corruption charges. Returning now to one of our top stories, the coronavirus crisis. Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio began this Lenten season with the Chinese community of Brooklyn, a sign of solidarity in this trying time. He sits down with Ed Wilkinson in this week's Into the Deep to talk about the service. Ed.
Thank you, Christine, and we're here with Bishop DiMarzio today. We're going to talk a little bit about Lent and a little bit about the coronavirus, bishops. This year they kind of linked together because you went out of your way to go to the Chinese community this year to give out ashes. Why did you pick a Chinese speaking
Well, I
parish?
think the Chinese community are feeling this this pressure on them. It seems like people say, well, it came from China. Maybe Chinese are carrying it. It's their fault. They need a little bit of support, and that's why I went to them to be with them and begin Lent with them and to give them some moral support.
Yeah, this was at St. Agatha's in Sunset Park, where they have a really lively group of Chinese Catholics. That's a real area where people are coming into the church right now, isn't it?
Right. The Sunset Park is one of the major Chinatowns, and the other one is in Flushing. I mean, we really have two, one in Brooklyn, one in Queens. It spreads out from there, but it's 500,000 Chinese born in Brooklyn and Queens. About a little bit more in Queens than Brooklyn, but it's a whole new community over the last 20 years, really, but in the last 10 years, it's really grown. So we're paying attention to them. We have masses in Chinese in, I guess, 7 or 8 parishes right now. So we're trying to accommodate the ones who are Catholic and reaching out to those who are not. And that's why we have a large RCII program for them. And every year we have over 200 Chinese converts.
Yeah. There's a misperception among people that the Chinese are carrying this virus all over the place, you know, and so people are avoiding Chinese restaurants. The attendance is down at these things. And was there any apprehension on your part at all going into the Chinese community?
Well, again, I guess anybody could have a little apprehension, but I think again we have to be realistic. You know, it's not a full-blown pandemic yet. It's very isolated still, and in the beginning, I think we need to give this support. There may come a time we have to have greater precautions, but it's not there yet.
What do you think in some places of the world where they're even canceling Ash Wednesday services, and some bishops have said there's no obligation to go to Mass, stay home? Is that, are we overreacting, do you think?
Not really. If it's a full-blown epidemic, if it's working in that area, that's the precaution. Stay isolated. It's the contagion happens when you have contact. So if that's necessary, that's some necessary at a particular time. We're not there yet. We did have some instructions before Lent. I said the cup certainly should not be used during Lent. We always do that anyhow for the flu season, but especially now. And you know, receiving communion in the hand, it's a lot more sanitary. And trying when the sign of peace is there, doesn't necessarily have to shake hands. You can bow, acknowledge somebody else. Little things like that will help. Again, one of the main things is keep your hands clean. You know, wash your hands. Use something that disinfects the hands, because this is how our germs are transmitted. That's the normal things that happen.
You told a great story in your column this week in the tablet about your grandmother and how she, earlier in the century, she faced up to this stigma on a particular community.
Yeah, I mean, the Spanish flu, 1918-19, was a terrible thing. United States, 600,000 people died. Worldwide, over 15 million. And, you know, it was the end of the World War, First World War. Soldiers were coming home. They were bringing it. They don't even think it started in Spain. They have no idea. They called it the Spanish flu, but they got the stigma, and it really, they're not even sure. And they had no protection then. They had no antibiotics. And they were giving people a lot of aspirins. They said they killed a lot of people with too much aspirin because there was nothing else they could do to try to bring the fevers down. So this was a story. It was by accident that I found out. There was a man every year came to bring my grandmother a gift. I said, "Who is this man? Why does he come to see you?" And she told me the story that his mother and father both died. They were neighbors next door. Nobody wanted to go help clean up these bodies so they could get them ready for burial, and she did. She wasn't afraid of anything. She was a little 5 foot person, but she was a fearless person. And he remembered, he was an orphan. He remembered that this woman had helped when his family needed help.
Great story. Good way to start Lent, Bishop.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your insights. And now we're going back to you, Christine, at the news desk.
Thank you, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. As Ed mentioned, you can read the bishop's full article in this week's tablet. You can pick it up at your local parish or visit thetablet.org and subscribe. Up next on Currents News, students at Our Lady's Catholic Academy in South Ozone Park are celebrating Black History Month in a big way. We'll show you. Plus, the story of Our Lady of Fatima is coming to the big screen. We'll have a preview for you right after the break. Stay with us. The contributions of African Americans to science, literature, music, and culture are endless. And all month, we've been celebrating Black history and how it has shaped our world today. To bring the month to a close, students at Our Lady's Catholic Academy in South Ozone Park took on the challenge of celebrating as many accomplishments of African Americans as possible. At a school assembly, the kids portrayed historic figures of the past and present. Teacher Kelly Legg put everything together and says highlighting Black history is something she does all year long while promoting the school's Catholic mission.
One of the 6th grade classes are actually doing Joyful, Joyful Lord from Sister Act, which is super cool, but it's also being able to rope in the Catholic identity that we have over at Our Lady's Catholic Academy.
I feel like that now it's people are not afraid to show who they are and they're equally.
This is the first year the school has celebrated Black History Month in such a big way. It plans to hold the assembly during the last week of February every year from now on. And finally tonight, a new film about Our Lady is hitting the big screen. Fatima tells the story of the Blessed Mother's visit to the 3 young children in Portugal, this time from the point of view of Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta. Claudia Torres has that story from Rome.
In 1917, 3 children in the town of Fatima, Portugal, received a number of Marian apparitions. Today, 100 years later, their experience continues to impact the world. The film, Fatima, inspired by real events, tells the story of siblings Francisco and Jacinta and their cousin Lucia, who at a young age received several apparitions from the Blessed Mother.
Who are you?
I come from heaven.
The film shows how the children's communication of these episodes is met with mixed reactions. Some respond with skepticism and even anger.
It is a sin making lies up.
It's true, Mama. She was as real as you are.
Why would the Mother of God choose you? What's so special about you?
Others, however, are drawn to the mystery of the Lady of which the children speak.
I've come for the seers.
Thousands of pilgrims then travel to Fatima, hoping to see a miracle. What they see there will change them forever. The film is directed by Marco Pontecorvo. The soundtrack features the voice of Andrea Bocelli in the song Grazia Plena.
All you need to say now is, I made everything up.
The apparitions in Fatima remain widely known even today. After the church verified the legitimacy of the miracles, the town became one of Portugal's most popular pilgrimage sites, drawing over 5 million visitors each year. Even Pope Francis visited in 2017 for the 100th anniversary of the apparitions. The film will be released in theaters throughout North America on April 24, 2020.
That was Claudia Torres reporting. The feast day of Our Lady of Fatima is on May 13th. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.